All right, today is the day, step number 3 of the Arete Supercar project. We have us a small scale model in plaster that we have sliced up. And we're gonna take those small slices and we're gonna convert them into full-size slices, which are actually going to become the ribs for a model that we're gonna use to produce our body parts for this car. Anyway, let's go take a look. Right over here. In our last step, we enlarged some ribs and printed them out on a printer in their full-scale format. Now we're taking these ribs, cutting them out of their paper. We're going to transfer that paper template onto a piece of wood to create the rib. Now, as we've printed each of these ribs just as half of the rib, we need to make a center line and then go ahead and copy or trace that paper onto the wood and then flip it. There's most of the things that we've done that we need to carry on to these templates. So we're going to line that template up on the center line and mark the center, trace the outside, and then we're also going to make some marks for some other things to attach it to a framework. So I'll speed this up a little bit just so we get the tracing for the outside done. Now when I say attach this to a framework, there's a couple different ways we can do this, but you're going to see two methods that I've used in the past. Once we've got it traced, then I have some marks where the frame is going to go through each of these ribs, and now I'm using a center punch to mark where that frame is going to be traveling through, just to put a dent in the wood so that I can see where I need to make that cut out. And if we get them traced out, time to cut the rib free. And there we have the number 1 rib cut out and ready to go. The center marks where it bounced in the frame are not cut out yet, but we're going to move on to the next rib. Same thing, marking the center line, taking the paper template, which is only half a rib, and tracing it out on one side. You can see in the center of this paper there's a little notch, which is actually the half the width of a 2x4, and that is where part of that framework is going to carry through. Lining up on the center line, running it to the edge of the board, tracing it out. And once you get it traced, all we need to do is mark that center framework piece, half a 2x4. Put the center punch mark where a round part of the middle framework is going to come through. Flip it over, and we'll trace the other side as well. This guy's being really careful to make sure he's got that thing lined up just perfect, isn't he? You just kind of have to trace back and forth so that your pencil doesn't follow the grain in the wood. And of course, cut it out. I use plywood here on some of the ribs, the first and the last, and one of the middle ribs. But otherwise, I use a fairly thin, almost like a masonite or paneling. Always makes for good ribs, a lot less expensive than full sheets of plywood as well. Now this is the last rib, the tail end. And in the last step when we showed how the ribs were marking for a perpendicular mounted ribs for the nose and the tail, you're going to see that happen in just a moment here. But that's the final number 14, I believe, ribs in this car. Now those perpendicular ribs that create all the detail in the nose and in the tail, this is cutting them out, and you'll see that they're just going to mount perpendicular to that last 14th rib. You'll see in greater detail as we actually assemble them onto the frame, what we're talking about, but there's how it's going to mount perpendicular. That's the number one center off of the 14th rib. With all of them cut out, trying to put them together on a platform. Now this is an assembly of a different car I built a couple of years before. You'll see it's on a wooden frame. But in this project, we've got a little more advanced. I've built a rotisserie that has two 3-inch steel tubes that run through the middle of it. And each of the ribs, when I marked with that center punch, that was to create a hole, a 3-inch hole, and those ribs slide on. Right now I'm welding a little metal tab every foot with a screw is going to travel through the rib into that tab and hold them in place. Now you see they're all kind of leaning over as well, so the next step is going to be to cut a couple of 2x2s and create some diagonal bracing to go in between them to hold them upright in 90 degrees according to the frame. So these braces just go in from the back side, put screws into the braces. One screw going through the metal tab, one screw going through the top. And then once all the braces are in, all the ribs are held nice and straight. Around that 14th rib, you see these little 2x2s mounted every 6 inches. That's to hold all the perpendicular ribs that create all the tail detail. And that's the tail. Moving on to the nose, same thing goes on. Perpendicular ribs mounted to the little blocks. Now you'll see also here that we're going to have this arrows pointing to what you'll find is that last rib is not actually suspended on the framework. So we had to create a way to suspend it in the air. And that's done by this little lookout 2x4 that passes through this rib and then is screwed to the back of that third rib from the back side. And that holds that number one rib up in the air. Another thing we need to do is each of the wheel wells, I've created a template that's actually slightly larger than the size of the wheel. And that's mounted at each wheel location, pointing at the piece of plywood we just cut out. And then mounted to the outside edge of that plywood is a piece of sheet metal that's going to form the wheel well. Well, here we are at the end of this step of the Arete Supercar project. Well, if you're interested in the project and you want to go see some of the previous steps, go ahead and take a look right here at some of these links to previous steps. You can also go to buildacreator.com and see those steps written out in kind of a blog form. Also some illustrations there, maybe a little more information if you want to kind of follow along, actually reproduce these steps in a car yourself or a different kind of project that these would work as well with. Anyway, we hope you enjoy them. We hope you follow us. Click below and subscribe. Put the little bell on so you get notifications and follow the projects as we go along. Anyway, thanks for stopping by. Come back and see us again here at Build a Creator.